And welcome to the daily space weather. Looking at the sun at 171 angstroms here, we see an active region rising, as well as the big bird sun coronal hole here is setting. And we've received the solar wind stream from it. Let's look at some more views here. Going to look at 193 angstroms also. Here's that coronal hole from which we are currently receiving a geomagnetic storm as protons bombard the magnetosphere, inducing all kinds of current in the planet. Let's look at this active region real quick. You see right underneath my cursor, there is a diffuse coronal hole rotating in also. Let's go back to 171 angstroms. Could be a sunspot, folks, although we don't see any umbra yet on the intensity gram. Let's look at more stuff. But first, let's talk about Patreon. That is the way to support this channel, as YouTube pays us precisely zilch to make these videos. So check out Patreon or other links below the video, perhaps the Hemp Lucid Spaced Out campaign if you're in the market for CBDs. Let's go back to space. Welcome to space and the Neo-Renaissance, folks. All your weather comes from space. And today we've got some space weather. So 10.7 centimeter radio flux still at 66, which is the ultimate solar minimum condition. I mean, we drew this orange line in here to show you where 70 is. And yeah, so currently 66 solar flux units, and solar wind is at about 650 kilometers per second. Next, we're going to look at the gong too. Actually, let's go back and look at some auroras here on spaceweather.com. Here's one sparked last night over Norway. And they said this went on for 4 hours straight, folks. Here's the gong 2 data. And it looks like the North Pole solar field is intensifying. Now that possible sunspot that's rising, that is a little bit south of the equator there, and that is having an effect on which pole is charging the heliospheric current sheet, which is depicted here in red and green. Red associated with the South Pole, green associated with the North. We do finally see some perturbations here in the X-ray flux, although we still have not even seen a B-class X-ray flare since July 7th. So perhaps that active region will produce some X-rays. We also did see a coronal mass ejection when looking at the stereo A images. And it just happened once again. I don't know if it's pure luck or divine providence. Please leave a comment if you have an opinion. And there it is, just in the final seconds. You can see the last couple seconds, you can see a little bit of material there. And that is headed straight down the Earth pike. We already looked at it on the C3, and that does appear to be another halo coronal mass ejection. So small coronal mass ejections headed our way on the regs, covered on this channel before anybody else. If you don't believe us, go look at our older videos. And taking a quick look at the GOES X-ray flux before we look at the LASCO C2, we do see a little bit of increased X-ray intensity from that active region that's rising. So that's something to look at throughout the next couple of days. And looking at the LASCO C3, we do indeed see a halo. So check it out. The last couple of frames, you can see a diffuse coronal mass ejection headed our way once again, folks. So we're going to continue to see perturbations there in the solar wind, not only from coronal hole wind streams, but also from coronal mass ejections, as we don't need an X-ray flare or a sunspot to create a coronal mass ejection. And here's the aurora prediction. Let me shrink that down so we can see date stamps. So some pretty intense auroras kicking off, and this geomagnetic storm could intensify throughout the day, so keep an eye on the real-time solar wind. We'll just let that play through once and then we'll move on, as there's a lot of stuff to cover even still. And we'll be making a second video after this also. Finally, let's get to the real-time solar wind. Phi angle is down at 45, so no magnetic connection with that new coronal hole system that's moving in. Although that could happen at any time, folks, so as soon as the Solar wind speed starts to drop down. We expect the plasma to quit blocking the magnetic field of the sun and that coronal hole to magnetically connect. So that coronal hole wind stream that's causing the geomagnetic storm right now is at 2.0 protons per cubic centimeter. That's the density. And the wind has ramped up since last I looked to 689 kilometers per second. Next, we'll do the earthquake rundown. We see the slight uptick in earthquakes here. Let's just go down the list of the last 24 hours. About 23 hours ago from the time of this video being shot, 5.0 hits Xinjiang, China. About an hour later, a 4.6 hits Japan. Next, a deep quake hits Chile there in western South America, the main spot we've been warning for months as they keep seeing deep quakes. And this one's deep also at 107 kilometers depth. Here's a 6.0 in that ocean rift zone northeast of New Zealand. I believe that is the largest quake of the past day. Let's show you that rift zone. Perhaps an unlisted plate boundary there, folks. Sure looks like one to me. What do you think? And continuing up the list here, we see a, what's next? 5.0 at New Zealand, an aftershock. That one occurring at 14:02 Universal Time. Here we see a 5.8 southeast of Easter Island. One of the most desolate places in the world, Easter Island. Here's a Tongan quake at around 4.7 magnitude. And the next 4 or above quake is this Fijian quake at a 4.5 magnitude, 583 kilometers depth, folks. If that happened at the surface, that would be about a 6 magnitude quake. Here's a 4.8 in the Aleutian chain. The Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. 4.3 at Argentina. That one also at depth. So heads up South America, western South America. That is the place to expect a larger quake. 5.2 at Tonga. That one at 224 kilometers. And we see, this is the area of the world, folks, for you new viewers. This is where we see the deepest quakes in the world on the regs every day or two. Quakes at 500 and 600 kilometers depth. Next, we have a 4.3 at Mexico. 4.6 at Chile. That one coming in just about 2 hours ago from when this video was shot. That one also at depth. Again, heads up, folks, if you are in a location where earthquakes are prone, please have a plan to be a liability, not an asset in the event of a disaster. If you're wondering who the cavalry is, it's probably because you're the cavalry. Here's the pressure maps. We're advancing it one day on windy.com, who, by the way, has a great mobile app, which could totally save your bacon. Massive anticyclone there over southwestern Canada. As the U.S. receives its first blizzard, and it's not even October yet, folks. Are you feeling run down? Don't feel run down. Just tune into our volcano rundown. As we have new volcanoes back on the list again, Mount Etna back to erupting, sporadic emissions observed there. Shivaluch, still producing a 13,000-foot ash plume. Yesterday it was producing a 28,000-foot ash plume and exploding, as it is still today. Mount Aso, 5,000-foot ash plume there. That's been on for weeks. Mount Ibu in Indonesia, 7,000-foot ash plume there. Tokono, exploding, producing a 7,000-foot ash plume. Shishalden in the Aleutian Islands, I was not aware that this was even advised in the first place. First time I ever saw it on the list. It's been downgraded to a yellow advisory alert due to seismicity. Popocatépetl, still producing a 22,000-foot ash plume and exploding. Revenador, still exploding, 15,000-foot ash plume there. And Sabancaya, exploding, producing a 24,000-foot ash plume. Please do not pole vault over the caldera at Sabancaya. And since we've got geomagnetic storm conditions, we're going to show you all 3 magnetosphere movies and different views from the Earth ground-based geospace magnetic perturbations. Here's the velocity first in the zoomed out portion of the magnetosphere, and we see some anomalies, not too surprising, as a bunch of plasma is inducing current through your planet and indeed through your head. Next, we'll look at the density. The density is actually quite low. Keep in mind, for you new viewers, the white is showing low density and the blue is showing high density. Finally, we'll look at the magnetohydrodynamic pressure. And if you're not familiar with magnetohydrodynamics, please read up, as it is the main cosmological force governing everything from the formation of galaxies and stars and planets to the formation of clouds above your head to the formation of you. Yes, these things form on ionization pathways, not on gravitational accretion disks. So, welcome to the Neo-Renaissance, folks, as astrophysics and indeed cosmology get rewritten before your very eyes. Anyway, we see very high magnetohydrodynamic pressure there in the geospace magnetosphere movies. Let's look at the current going through the planet. Now, these are all based on the University of Michigan geospace model, which is based on the space weather modeling framework. If you want to read about it, there are links below the video to that, as there are many, many, many variables to come up with these models. Thousands and thousands of ground-based magnetometers, for instance, folks. So if you're paying somebody to create ground-based magnetometers, the data's not being hidden from you, folks, because here it is. We show it every day. Anyway, if you notice, these areas look like spirals, and that's because there's a Birkeland current going into and out of both ends of your planet. Please leave a comment if you're viewing from a planet other than Earth, different solar system, galaxy, spacecraft, plane of existence, multiverse, or universe. Please leave a comment, as we are interested in your cosmology. I'll let that play through one more time. Magnetohydrodynamics, folks. It's going to be increasingly important in your daily life, much less in your science nerding. Let's reflect on that. And here's the GOES X-ray flux, electron flux, and we see some big striations in this, not surprising. As remember, folks, solar wind is comprised mostly of protons, hydrogen nuclei, and they really want electrons. So we see this characteristic dip in the electron flux. And here's the relativistic electrons as reported at solon.info. Check it out for all kinds of the most cutting-edge and crucial variables regarding solar activity. Welcome to cycle 25. Charging hazards are pretty minimal here, primarily over Mexico, Northern South America, and Central America, but not too bad. And let's look at the ionosphere, which, by the way, is all over the place. We see sudden charges, sudden discharges, as you would expect, as again, current is flowing through the planet at a high rate. Now, this geomagnetic storm could easily cause some grids to fail. We see this sudden charge up over the, looks like the Pacific Ocean there in the ionosphere. You see it made it all the way up to 14 megahertz in quite a large area there. And let's just advance to the latest frame and move on, as there's still more data to cover. And there's the current state of affairs. Charge up to 12 megahertz over India right now. And pretty charged on the nighttime side also. No surprises here. Let's talk prepping, such as David Dubine's new book, Climate Revolution, The Grand Solar Minimum. Understand, prepare, adapt, and thrive in the coming solar changes. Now, we're headed back up to a solar maximum, folks. And we're keeping a close eye on it, because if it's a super small solar maximum, that's even worse news for you. Solar minimum are the dangerous times of the sun's activity, folks. And let's take an excerpt, a random excerpt from David's book. One of the ways that we talk about climate on the planet is by ice cores. And one of the other ways is by just drilling ocean sediments. So obviously there's sediments can be found at the bottoms of lakes and oceans and so on. This is one of the ways that we look up climate data. And this is part of the reason why we don't believe that the planet is warming. And one of the reasons why we understand with quite a lot of certainty that carbon dioxide Has nothing to do with the planet's temperature, except that about 800 years after the temperature goes up, the carbon dioxide goes up. And you can emit as much carbon as you like, folks. It's not going to make the planet warmer nor colder. And we've provided links below the video to oilseedcrops.org's link to the Climate Revolution book. We are cited in the book. Thanks, David. Let's get you on to the show before September ends, as September is National Prepping Month. Are you prepped? Let's talk about unconventional ways to prep. Do you own a bicycle? Do you have a bicycle in your bomb shelter / prepping area? Are you aware that people will start to kill each other within 24 hours of being unable to purchase gas at the pump? Now, in a big grid down situation, gas pumps will stop working immediately as they are powered by electricity, right? You want to be the hero of your neighborhood? Well, why not get yourself a bike? Now, I recommend a hybrid because a hybrid is kind of the most versatile in a lot of ways. Check out this felt, keeping you under $1,000. The Versa Speed 30. It's got lugs for racks. You can see there on the seat tube. I'm sorry, not the seat tube. The seat stays. That's the tube that goes between the rear hub and the seat post there. You can see those lugs on there as well as down on the bottom. And that's to put a rack on the bike. So do you have a bicycle in your prepping garage? No? Well, head to theveloshop.net and perhaps purchase one. Every bicycle purchase has a free bike fit included, a $150 value. So head to theveloshop.net and maybe go visit Becky, buy a new bike, add it to your prepping. Here ends this video's prepping month talk. Do you know where things are in the solar system, Milky Way team? We're approaching a new moon. And there's where things will be in 1 week. Milky Way galaxy team for the win. Here's where things are above my head as the sun is about to rise, folks. And Deneb is about to set. Please leave a comment if you know anything about Deneb. The Tale of the Swan. If you want to read about geomagnetic storms, we've got a link below the video to this article about the way pressure is induced and current flows as a result of solar protons. Were you aware that a blizzard is in the process of hitting? Well, here's what it's going to be like in the first second of October 1st, according to the GFS model at tropicaltidbits.com. We are looking at, that looks like over 2 feet of snow there, folks. In fact, we're getting into those dark green colors there. Please leave a comment if you're already inundated with snow, as we are interested. We'll display pictures, so just send us an email. Links in the description to all of that stuff. So please click those links and support the channel that way. If you're interested in what's going on above your head in terms of lightning, check out lightningmaps.org. And here's the current state of affairs. We've got some pretty serious lightning here going on over the U.S. Parkersburg. I don't know anything about Ohio geography. If you're camping in Wayne National Forest, heads up, there could be some thunder rolling in. You may want to get in a car. And we've moved on to value-added services here. Here's the Weather Underground Doppler radar. And it looks like there's some wintry mix hitting there in Montana already. Some snow in Canada. Moving on to the U.S. water vapor map. This is the NASA GOES interactive weather satellites, folks. And we're going to zoom in on this convergence zone as it's looking pretty violent over the southeastern Missouri-Tennessee border area. Check it out. As the most interesting places of weather, folks, are where there are massive pressure gradients. That's where, let's just say that's where the things happen. If you were flying a plane across this area right now, Let's just say you'd experience turbulence, especially if you're traveling east to west, because you're going to go from a low pressure into a very high pressure air, and that's basically like running into a wall of air. And here's the eastern jet streams on nullschool.net. And we see extreme meridional jet stream flow in the northern hemisphere and extremely powerful jet stream flow in the southern hemisphere, doubled up, tripled up, flow in all kinds of weird directions. Let's look at the western world. And there's the western jets. A really severe bend there, southeast of South America, where it's making a 180-degree turn over about a 500-mile period there. And some convective forces in the northern hemisphere. Let's look at it from the polar view in the north. We see some quite significant convective forces still running the show up there as opposed to normal jet stream flow. And here's the 10 hectopascal view. This is the ultra high pressure winds, the upper level stuff, and we see this counter rotation area is strengthening in the northern hemisphere. Check out what's going on in the south. Were you aware this happens on the planet? Please leave a comment. And thanks new viewers, subscribers, etc. And stay tuned for another video, but first, a bonus section. And we're looking at the colorized magnetogram here because we want to take a look at this rising active region. And that is cycle 24, Plage, folks. That is not a cycle 25 behavior there. That's a cycle 24 behavior. But we are getting to the point where we're seeing more cycle 25 magnetism than cycle 24 magnetism. So welcome to 25, and welcome to the Neo-Renaissance, and welcome to the geomagnetic storm. Keep an eye on power grids, folks, and when I say ion, the pun is intentional. Remember, since it'll never be now again, may the solar wind be at your back, and the atherosclerosis absent from your veins.